before we get started, you are apparently on the government advisory body for productivity and skills, which is very cool. What does that mean, and how does one get into the government advisory body for productivity?
It's a great question, actually. So it sits under the Secretary of State, reporting into Boris, and it's part of the levelling up strategy. And the idea is really to think about skills of the future and how they will be delivered in the UK. So Boris has come out and basically said that he doesn't think education should just be about secondary school and should just be about young people going to university anymore. It should be that you get to go to university when you're 25, 35, 45. And I guess part of our job is really thinking about how those skills can actually be delivered, and looking to see, actually, given what we have already, whether or not there's some people who are doing better than others in delivering skills.
Okay. So how did you get this job? Does the government email you? Does someone knock on your door? How does that work?
This was an open competition. So They basically advertised, they asked for things like, backgrounds in economics, backgrounds in labour. And I think from their perspective, my background in economics coupled with the behavioural science stuff, and actually having written the book on kind of thinking about careers from an individual perspective, was quite appealing. So we've ended up being, we're six experts in the committee. One person's an education specialist, 4 traditional economists, and then there's kind of me, who fits between the kind of behavioural economics mould.
Okay. Yeah, so you're an associate professor of behavioural sciences at LSE, is that right?
Yeah.
Well, one thing that intrigued me as I was reading about in reading about your background, I wouldn't have thought that behavioural sciences, in terms of time management and productivity and procrastination, some of the stuff you talk about in the book, that feels to me as like a layperson that knows nothing to not quite fit within economics. So how does behavioral science fit into the economics as a field?
So, I mean, if you think about the simple lesson that you might learn if you've taken an economics class, we learn that when people are making decisions, they weigh up the cost, the benefits, and the risk. And I know you have a medical background, so you can appreciate that if someone is choosing to have a Big Mac today, that you might necessarily believe that they're weighing up the costs in 10 years' time, and the second Big Mac the next day, and the third Big Mac. And that's really where I kind of come from, is thinking, how do people actually make decisions? But how can we tweak that model to really understand human decision-making in a much better way than economists do, and in a way that's actually useful for policymakers, which I think that a lot of psychologists fail. So I kind of put myself in the centre, where we want to be able to advise government, I want to be able to advise firms on what they should actually do to make people happier, more productive, whatever is their goal in a particular moment. And to do that, we fundamentally need to understand decision making. And the second thing that's really important to understand is the intent action gap. So why is it that I, as Grace would say, I will do things today, but very often don't end up doing them? And whether we take about education, people who enter education often don't study as much as they should. People often choose courses that are particularly bad for them, even though they say that they might actually go another path. So again, it's really getting down to the nitty gritty of how can we alter decision making in a way that's not paternalistic, but is giving people information to help them go in the right direction.
Okay. Yeah, the intent to action gap. I think we've all felt that in our lives multiple times a day. As I was reading this, I started listening to your book about 4 or 5 days ago. And the very first chapter talks about